Okay, so good morning, everybody. We're going to, first of all, thank you everybody for coming. Uh, a couple of days before Pesach, I'm sure everybody is super busy. Um, um, so we are continuing, as Mary told me, with the third parsha of the Shema, Parashat Tzitzit. Yes, please.
In shema online in a couple of days. There was an article about the origin of Hanukkah and religion. So if anybody's interested, I could forward you the.
Cool.
Yeah. I send it to you and you'll distribute it.
Yeah, we can do that.
It is pretty interesting.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. Okay, so tzitzit. Let's go back. Actually, let's do it the other way. What do we have there? So it's this. I'm looking at page 101. So Parashat Tzitzit is the third section of the Shema. And Parashat Tzitzit is basically dealing with one concept, one commandment that is somehow connected to another commandment, okay? So that commandment is to put on tzitzit. If you have a four-corner garment, you need to put tassels, fringes, whatever, tzitzit on that garment. In the old days, people used to wear like it's called galabia. The Arabs still some traditional whatever still wear it. We don't wear it like anymore. So the rabbis at some point they said, okay, this mitzvah is going to disappear if we're not going to have such garments. So they created what we call the talit katan, the under shirt that has four corners, and we have that. And we have the talit gadol, the talit that we put on during tefillah, in order to maintain that mitzvah. But on a Torah, and it became like a rabbinic, mitzvah. But on a Torah level, it's important to understand that only if you have such a garment, you happen to wear something that looks like a blanket, basically, then it needs to has those tzitzit on it. Yes.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, please.
They wear the kafetza and even suit jacket. You'll notice that it's always rounded.
Correct. To avoid the four corners. Correct. To avoid, that's exactly it. Right. In sometimes like people that have the jackets or whatever, the Hasidic long coats. So this one is rounded, like this jacket, but sometimes it's like straight. And if you have like an opening in the back, so if you have like only one, like a vent, whatever, so it's like 1, 2, 3, 4. Theoretically, it should have been, have it tzitzit, even though it's not accurate because you have like also here 2 more usually, and usually there are 2 here, so it becomes already 8. And sometimes, but in order to avoid it, as Terry mentioned, some are so strict about that, so they made specifically, especially the inner ones that you don't really see round, to avoid by any chance it's going to be 4 corners. But the point is, overall, our clothes today do not have 4 corners and then 4. But if you, okay, so that's the Torah level. Fine. What is the purpose? What is the theological idea? So the Torah is very clear. In the tzitzit, you're going to have a ptil tchelet, one string that is going to be blue. And you see it, uzchartem et kol mitzvot Hashem v'asitem otam. By looking at it, you're going to remember all the mitzvot, and you shall perform them. So how does it work? So the Mishnah already deals with that, and there's an explanation that says what? That the blue strings are reminding us of the ocean, and the ocean reminds us of the sky, and the sky reminds us of Kisei HaKavod, God's presence. Okay, so these are like, basically, now, so there's a whole debate, by the way, about the tchelet, the blue. Some people use them, some people don't use them today. There's a whole debate. It was unknown for many, many, many years. What is it? How do you create that blue? For many, many years, you'd never, there were no blue strings. They kind of like determined it. The Talmud talks about it as some sort of a snail that lives in the ocean, that you produce that from that, whatever. It's a whole big deal today. Some use it, some hold by it, some don't, whatever. Another theological idea behind that. We know historically that blue, and we see it from the parashiyot that we just read in Bigdei Kehuna on the garments of the Kohanim, blue was used by the Kohanim. On the garments of the Kohanim, of the priests, you had blue. They used blue. Okay? Blue was the color of royalty, hence royal blue. Okay? So, like, even you say, like, right, it was associated, and it's like, when you say blue blood, there was like the whole, it's somehow connected to the whole thing. And royalty, fine. What is the theological, philosophical idea about that? So we understand the Kohanim, the priests, or the leaders, we get it. So therefore it makes sense. It was an expensive, still expensive. Try to buy like blue strings for your talus, you'll see it's expensive. It is about $100 for a set. Yeah, but whatever. It's expensive, especially back then. It's a process in order to produce that color. It made things expensive, and therefore it became also the color of the royalty and everything. Fine. So we understand that the Kohanim, as the leaders, as the royalty or whatever, fine. What is the message that the Torah is trying to teach us, that everybody should have that on their garment? Okay, this is the simple text, but there's a good. The message is very simple. Everybody's royalty. Everybody is royalty. Even the simple poor Jew need to put a tchelet on their tzitzit. And by doing so, we're acknowledging, we're sending a message, we're all royalty. Okay? Oh, that's a different story. Okay. That's what the Torah is trying to this is a message that we see like throughout the Torah all the time. Don't rely. I get it. The Kohanim are going to the sacrifices and all. I get it. But this is why we moved away from that. The rabbi said, no, it's going to be everybody's obligation to daven. Everybody needs to form their own relationship with God. Right? It's the same idea. We're all royalty. We're all forming our own relationship with God. Now, so I'm going to remember all that kind of stuff. I'm going to remember God. It's going to help me. It's like, you know, when you have like a constant reminder, like, you know, in the old days, I remember like when, I remember like in the old days when I was growing up, on Shabbat, like for example, people like when they wanted to remember something, not to forget, they would like, you know, turn their watch. And then it's like, you know, it's kind of a reminder of when they came home, they said like, oh, I wanted to remember something. Now, you can't like, you know, pull out your phone and make like a little note. So it's a constant reminder. Okay. It's a constant reminder to remember the mitzvot, to act in a certain way, all that kind of stuff. Fine. Let's go a little bit technical here. There are a lot of ideas about that, about the tzitzit. Um, um, I want to talk about one that actually differs between our tradition and Reform tradition. If you look at the Reform Sidurim, you will see that the first part of that Parshiah is missing. They go directly into Leman Tizkeru, the last two psukim of that. All that stuff of the tzitzit is missing. And yet, when you go to a Reform synagogue, I mean, you could definitely put on a talit or something. So what is going on? Why did they take it out? And historically, it's very interesting. So you know that there was an interesting shift in the development of a Reform service, moving away from Shabbat morning to Friday night. Why? Because people go to work on Shabbat morning, and therefore, what happened was that they decided to make the main service as Friday night because people are not coming Shabbat morning. Okay. At the same time, by the way, during the same time, mainly here in America, yeah. At the same time, we're talking about like, you know, the 30s, 40s, 50s. At the same time, there was in traditional synagogue a movement also to start the Hashkama Minyanim. It was the same, dealing with the same problem. People are going to go to work. They had to go to work, especially during the time of the Depression and everything in the 40s, and things were not so great economically here. And so the rabbi said, okay, let's have a quick minyan early in the morning, people in and out, and they go to work. And Shabbos, this is how the old Ashkama Minyanim started. That correct. That was the reality, especially in the 30s, especially in the 40s, especially in the 50s, where people had no choice. They had to go to work on Shabbat morning. So, two different solutions how to deal with that. Reform Judaism said, we're going to move the service to Friday night, make it the main service. And that means we're going to take elements like Torah reading, for example, going to move it to the Friday night service. Otherwise, they're not going to hear Torah reading at all because they're not coming Shabbat morning. They have to go to work. Fine. Now, let's go back to the tzitzit or talit. The Mishnah, what? No. So the Mishnah is very, very clear that a talit is what we call a beged yom, right? The obligation to put a talit on it's only on a beged yom and clothes that you wear during the day. Okay, there's no obligation, even rabbinic, by the way, it's a custom, but it's not even to wear the tzitzit at night, because it's not it's not the you know, it's only during the day. It's a mitzvah that is applicable for the day. By the way, this is why women are exempt from that mitzvah, because it's a time-bound mitzvah. Okay, it's only noheget only during the day. Right? When you come to a Mariv service, people are not wearing a talit, only the chazan. Why? Forget about Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the only time that, you know, well, for different reasons. But why only the chazan? The chazan is wearing because of Kvod HaTzibur, because he's the emissary, is the representative of the congregation. But everybody else is, nobody's like, if Friday night you come to shul, nobody's wearing a talit. Only the chazan. Why? Because it's not a mitzvah of the night, it's a mitzvah of the day. Now, back to the reform. If the service shifts from the morning to the evening, and the tradition is not to wear a talit in the morning, why do I need it? There's no logic. I can counter that argument, but that's a different story. According to them, I don't need. Why am I mentioning tzitzit if I'm not wearing a talit during the night? And therefore, they took it out and they left only the part that resonates. Thus, you will be reminded to keep all my commandments and be holy to your God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. Okay, and this is what you're going to find in Reform Sidurim. Only those two psukim, they cut the whole thing. Has to do with the history, especially here in America. And then fast forward, it became Reformed tradition. So now, even in the morning service, like, Shabbat morning service, Reformed places, they don't have that section. Because it became the tradition not to recite Parashat Tzitzit, only the last two verses. In the last Sidur that they published about 10 years ago, it's called Mishkan Tfilah. They brought it as an option, but most places got used to it. This is the way we recite the Shema since the 30s. That's it. So the morning is already affected by the evening, even though the evening was... Anyway, yes, history. They put on talit. Correct. Then that's correct. Correct.
You can wear it again, but.
Correct. So it's a big deal. And in morning services, they do put on a talit, and yet still this thing, that section is not there in most places. Anyway, just a side note. Vast majority, vast majority. It's the concept is a concept exists, but I like very, very few, if any, daven on a daily basis. No, because it's a personal thing, and you don't need to do that in an organized way. If you open the Siddur, the Reform Siddur, it has davening for weekdays. Yeah, of course there is. It's there in the Siddur. Most congregations don't have a minyan, don't have services on a daily basis. No, definitely not. But that has to do more with reality rather than philosophy. Okay. So there's a whole discussion about the tzitzit, like, the number of strings and the strings, I'm sorry, and the ties and the whatever, all that kind of stuff. You can play with that. What? No, for sure. But I'm saying, like, forget about how you tie it, but all the knots, and if you count there's a kind of a play that you can play with that and come to the number 613. Whatever. This is just a cute fact. So what is basically the Torah says? The Torah says, look, in order to do that, to remind yourself, constantly remind yourself, put it this thing. You have like this something that is going to remind you how you're supposed to behave, and so you're not going to do the wrong things. And then the other thing that is like, they kind of like put it there is Zecherat Yetziat Mitzrayim. Sherotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim. I'm the God who took you out of Egypt to be your God. So it's also connected to that mitzvah of Zecherat Yetziat Mitzrayim. This is how we fulfill that mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to remember the Exodus every day. And this is how we fulfill that mitzvah. Some people have a custom of reciting the Shesh Zechirot after Tfilah. Okay, the 6 things that you're supposed to remember. One of them is the Exodus. One of them is for example, Miriam, whatever. Amalek is another example. The man is another, whatever. Some people have the custom of reciting that stuff. on it after tefillah, but that's just a much later custom. The fulfillment of that obligation of Zechirat Yetziat Mitzrayim, remember the Exodus, you fulfill in this section of tzitzit in the Shema. Okay, fine. Moving on. So if you remember, we started with the two blessings before the Shema. One was talking about the nature and like luminaries and all that kind of stuff and whatever, cosmos and, very, very general, moving more into the relationship of Am Yisrael with God, specifically the Torah, all that kind of stuff, into the Shema, which is the first section, is my relationship with God. And then it's the practicality of it. So we have the second paragraph, we spoke about that last week, reward and punishment. And then what is the safeguard? What are the mechanisms that we put in, mechanisms that we put in order to make sure that we are on the right track? Is the tzitzit, one of them at least. Okay, so that's the process. Okay, it's process of reduction and then practicality. Fine. If that's the case, we need to ask ourselves, where are we going with that? Where are we going with that? If I established my relationship as citizen of the world, as citizen of Am Yisrael, my personal relationship with God, I understand the rules and regulations, which is the second parsha of the Shema. I understand what is the mechanism that helped me to stay on the right path. Then what's going to happen next? That means I do everything, assuming I do everything right. Assuming I do everything right, what's going to happen? I'm going to see the light, right? It's going to be good. How we call that in concept of tefillah? Redemption. Right? All that is going to lead me to redemption. Guess what? The next bracha, starting right after the Shema, is the blessing of redemption. Okay, so let's go into that. Now, how it's being the theme of redemption, how does it flow from the Shema? That's the end. It's the redemption from Egypt. That's the ultimate redemption. That is already there in Parashat Tzitzit. So now we just introduced that theme of redemption at the end of Shema. And we're going to now, really it becomes the topic, or the theme of the next blessing. Now, and how do we do that? We did?
In the last prophet, it's kind of like a review of things that happen related to the redemption.
So it's a God of history. It's a God of history. But okay, if it's a God of history, right? So God has done all those wonderful things for us and took us out of Egypt and blah, 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 whatever. Right? Good, great. Why am I doing that? Who cares? Tefillah is not a history lesson. Yes. To remind us, okay, what am I doing with that? For what? I need to remember something.
Maybe to let us know that if it happened before, it can happen again.
Amazing. Okay. And not only that, yeah, it reminds us that if it happened before, it could happen again. And that's a fundamental idea that I believe in that redemption. I believe that, okay. Now we start, we start with the word emet. I know that we're used to say Hashem Elokechem emet, but the word emet is not part of the pasuk at the end of the Shema. Ani Hashem Elokechem. That's the end of the pasuk. The word emet belongs to the rabbinic text already. Emet ve'yatziv ve'nachon ve'kayam ve'yashar ve'ne'eman. Ha. So what the rabbis decided? The rabbi said, okay, you are in the Shema. You accepted the yoke of heaven. I don't want to have any interruptions between that and redemption. The psychological message here is, okay, God, I'm with you. I accept the rules. I accepted you. All that kind of stuff. I understand the mechanism. I want redemption. There's not going to be any breaks here. I want it to, streamline. And therefore, the custom has developed that what? We add the word emet into the end of the last pasuk of the Shema. Okay. Where this emet comes from, what's the concept of that emet comes from? It comes from a pasuk in Jeremiah. Jeremiah 10:10 says, Hashem Elokim emet. So here Hashem Elokechem emet, but it's the same idea. Okay, so it's an adaptation on that pasuk. God is true. So this is where we take it from. Now, here, if you look at that page 103, you see all those adjectives. 103. Yeah, there are 15. Yes. 102, let's do the English. Firm and established and enduring, right and faithful, beloved, cherished, delightful, pleasant, awesome, mighty, perfect, accepted, good, and beautiful. What? What is these are descriptions of what? No, is this faith for us forever? Okay. So Terry is correct. 15 is a big number in Judaism. They have like 15 words here describing that thing, right? That, how we call it? That faith, right? The faith that is established because we just accepted the yoke of heaven, right? So it's 15. 15 is a big number in Judaism. 15, we have 15 Psalms, Shir HaMa'alot or Shir LaMa'alot, the 15 Psalms. We have Dayenu, thank you, making it relevant. 15 stanzas of Dayenu in the Haggadah, but it's also 15 steps that leading to the Eichal in Beit HaMikdash. And in Judaism, many times it's symbolism for going up. Okay, so what is this? We said Hadavar Hazeh. So here in the Quran they say this faith. Okay, it's that faith that we just declared in the Shema. It could be also that faith in Yetziat Mitzrayim that we just and the redemption. And according to rabbis, it's also the belief that faith, the belief that God is the one who took us out of Egypt. Not only did the Exodus happen, but it was done by God. Fine. Then we go and say, Ala Rishonim v'ala Acharonim. Like towards the bottom of the page on 103. Loosely translated as for the early and the later generations, this faith has proved good and enduring forever. The message of the Torah and commandments is relevant, is always relevant. All the, the past and the later generations as well. So the philosophical idea here that every generation has the ability, not only the ability, perhaps even the obligation to make changes, express whatever in a different way, the ideas of our faith in the way that they see that resonates with people, but the belief, the foundations, the fundamentals stay the same. In other words, the basics of Judaism do not change. The core beliefs of Judaism do not change. But I can promise you that the Judaism that your great-grandparents practiced is very different than today. They didn't deal with aluminum foil. Okay? Okay. Okay. And a lot of the stuff that we do today is very different. Okay. Somebody would just like, ask me about the matzahs, whatever. I told them, it's like probably 500-600 years ago, 700 years ago, the matzahs were not the matzahs that we eat today. No, they were not even like shmura matzah. They were like a lafa. Yeah. The Yemenites still eat that today, by the way. Yeah. So how did it happen that we ended up with the shmura matzah that we have today? Here's the problem with the Yemenite matzah. The Yemenite matzah is basically a lafa. Okay, it's a soft pita, soft. The problem is you can't eat that the next day. You have to eat it fresh. So what was the custom? And by the way, somebody came to me and they said that like in Iran, they did that like when they grew up. That means that you baked fresh matzah like that every day. During the Chag, you can bake. That's not a problem. They did that not on Shabbos, I get it. But on the Chag, they baked fresh matzah, and definitely during the intermediate days on Chol HaMoed, they baked fresh matzah. Then the rabbis come and they said, like, wait, what happens if somebody is not careful to have flour and water? It's going to sit down for a little bit too long, and you'll have pure chametz. Correct, right? Any matzah has the potential of becoming chametz. That's it. Just give it enough time, right? So they said, this is horrible. We can't do that, right? This is unacceptable. The people will create chametz on Pesach. That's a Torah level violation. Therefore, all the matzahs have to be made in advance. So if all the matzah has to be made in advance before the Chag, you need to change the matzah because the soft matzah is not going to work. It's not going to work anymore. You can't eat it a week later. It's not going to work. So they came with a dry matzah, which is what we have today, like the shmura matzah, made by hand. Fast forward, like another, 300 years or so, whatever, the Industrial Revolution. All of a sudden, we start to use machines. And we ended up with the square matzahs that are made by machines. It's about 200 plus years that we have, like, those, that's it.
We'll come up with this like dry matzah.
What do you mean?
The notion about that it had to be hard happened 700 years ago.
I would say probably. The Rambam doesn't even talk about that. Yeah. Everything in Judaism progresses. Okay, here's an example. This year, there's a good example. This year, Erev Pesach is Shabbat. Shabbat, it doesn't matter, Shabbat. So what we do is we take, like, we burn the chametz, whatever, on Friday, we search for the chametz Thursday night, Shabbat is Shabbat, whatever, all that kind of stuff. You know what the Rambam says? Look at the Rambam. The Rambam is very simple. He said, you eat your chametz Shabbat morning until the time that is permissible, and then the rest of it kofe kli, you cover it with a plate or something like that.
That's it.
That's it. And after the Chag, you burn it. Meaning during Chol HaMoed, you burn it, and that or you take it out to the trash, and that's it. We go mishuga. Oh, no. Then so if you look at the evolution of that simple, yeah, if you look at the evolution of that particular halacha, for example, you look at the Rambam, you look at later in the Shulchan Aruch, he expands on that. You look at the Mishnah Berurah, he expands on that. You look at, until the mishugas that we have today. That's the evolution of halacha in every aspect. Okay, why they didn't think about that? Because it was not a big deal. You take the leftover pita that you have from Shabbat morning, you put a plate on that, so somebody's not going to take it by a chance. You don't have to do anything. You don't burn it. You don't dump it. And that's craziness. Finished. That's what I said. Like, it's like if the Rambam lived today, you wouldn't eat in his house. It's like that's the evolution of Judaism. Every time there's like a new chumrah. Every time we add another layer, and we come more and more. Okay.
Every time.
Wait, enough. Now, what are we talking about even?
We become chamorim.
Nechama. Okay. So the idea is the fundamentals of Judaism do not change. The faith does not change. However, the way we express it, our practice sometimes, not to mention the way the marketing that we do, or the way we teach it, changes. Okay, and that's normal, and that's relevant, and that's the way it should be. Okay, if I'm thinking about the shiurim or the drashot that were given 300 years ago, probably wouldn't resonate today with people, and what people are learning today does not resonate with people 300 years ago. Okay, that's fine, as long as the fundamentals and the ideas do not change. Now, I want to draw your attention in that idea into what I call like kind of a movement that we go back and forth between two elements. One is the Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the other one is, let's call it faith in God or whatever, or in the process. One is private, one is national. Okay? I believe in the Exodus, but the way I internalize it and the way what I do with that is personal, right? Think about even the Seder. Every family has different traditions. We all do the same thing. We all tell the story of the Exodus. Some throw marshmallows, and some will look at that as like, what are you, crazy? Scallions, whatever. Everybody has their own mishigas. That's what happens in my house. And I didn't grow up with any games, by the way. I grew up in Israel. We didn't have any games, any whatever, any of that. But you try to make it relevant to the kids. So the two elements, all that movement, it's me as an individual, but I'm also part of the collective. It's the Exodus, but it's my expression or my belief or my take on that. It's like I'm part of Am Yisrael in Ahava Rabbah. It's the Torah, but when it comes to the Shema, it's my personal relationship with God. It's always like that. Those two elements all the time. It's my remembrance, right? Like Leman tizkor yom tzatcha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. How do I remember that? I mean, obviously not really remembering it. I was not born there then, but how it's in my recollection versus the national one. It's the love versus fulfillment of mitzvot. In order for me to be with you, in order for me, okay, let's take something very simple, even to eat in your house or whatever that is, or that we belong to the same, we daven together, we have to have the same practice, or roughly, or whatever, like some guidelines, right? But in terms of the love or my thoughts, we can be different. My concept, for example, about what's the meaning of Shabbat or whatever could be very different than yours. You know, Hasidim and Mitnagdim, in terms of like the philosophy, nobody thinks about philosophy anymore. But but in terms of philosophy, it's two different worlds. But they can eat at each other's home. Well, today is, like, forget it, because we're crazy. But theoretically, if we have the same practice, okay, Shabbat is Shabbat, we have few mitzvot, we have the mitzvot, we have the halacha, whatever. As long as we have like pretty much the same guidelines, we can do that. But how do I express my love to God? That's totally up to me. That's individual. And it might be different than yours. But it's okay. Of course it is. It's wonderful.
Isn't it better if Am Yisrael is like one nation together?
We are in terms of our practice. But what's going on in my heart and my head? I like green, you like red. It's totally fine. When I go and buy my etrog, I like yellow, you like green. And it's totally fine. I like my lulav tall and you like your lulav short. What's wrong with that? As long as they're both kosher, it's fine with me. I like, you know, my talus to be white, and this one like blue, and this one like black, and this one likes all the colors of the rainbow. Who cares?
I'm just saying that Am Yisrael would be stronger.
I don't think so. I think that the strength comes because of diversity.
And then when you have rabbinic religion.
Correct. So I want to have, we're both going to put on a talus. We both going to shake the lulav. We're both going to hear the shofar. But your shofar is a Yemenite long one. Mine is a short Ashkenazi one. We both fulfill the mitzvah. It's a matter of taste. Okay? I once gave a shiur. I might do something with that. And it's like, you know, I learned something about. Actually, I might do that in one of the sermons in Pesach. We'll see. That it's the beauty and the strength of Am Yisrael is the fact that everybody has their form of expression. You know, I wear a knitted kippah, and some others put a velvet black kippah. So what?
As long as you have the same goal.
That's exactly my point. As long as we both keep Shabbat, and we both keep kosher, and we both shake the lulav, and we both listen to the shofar, and we both whatever, that's fine. Who cares if in my house you eat dairy and then this one eat meat?
And everyone has a different recipe for the brisket.
Exactly. Everybody has a different recipe for the brisket. That's it. The point is that we are so, sometimes, I think this is the strength. Because if I'm not going to, okay. Beautiful idea. From 2 weeks ago in the Parsha. We're digressing, but I think it's important. Vayakel Pkudei, the two Parshiot. Vayakel, there's like a description of all the work that the two architects of the Mishkan are doing, Betzalel and Aholiab. Fine. They build whatever, the Mishkan and all the parts and all that kind of stuff. In the other, in Pekudei, we see that it's Moshe Rabbeinu, that he erects the Mishkan, he, you know, and he builds the Aron, he builds the menorah, and there's like the garments of the Kohanim. So it's kind of like the same idea, like, you know, doing that Mishkan, doing like, you know, but you know what's different? 18 times in Parashat Pekudei, the Torah says, Kasher diber Hashem, or Kasher tziva Hashem beyad Moshe. That Moshe, the Torah goes out of its way to say that Bnei Israel and Moshe did exactly as they were commanded. When it comes to Parashat Pekudei, Vayakel, I'm sorry, with Aholiab and Betzalel, not even once. Not even, well, what do you want to tell me? That he didn't follow the instructions? Of course he followed the instructions. But you know what's the difference? God didn't really give him instructions. God said, I'm going to give him the inspiration. Yes, he has a blueprint, but I'm going to give him inspiration to come up with the design that he comes. It's going to be his expression. And because he was commanded to be creative, it doesn't say not even once as he was commanded by God. Not even once. But when it comes to Moshe and the people, they had to be exactly accurate, the way God expressed, the way God detailed exactly how he wants those things that they had to make. And I think this is the whole thing of Judaism when it comes to that particular issue. On one hand, sometimes, okay, let's bring it down to our lives. It's halakha. You got to do it the way it's written, the way you were commanded. Nothing to discuss. However, all the stuff around that, the minhagim, the whatever, the flavor, the design, whatever, all that kind of stuff, we have the obligation to be creative. Learn from find the meaning in that stuff, because otherwise it's not going to be yours. You're not going to feel like connected to it. If you want a bumpy etrog and yellow, great. If you like smooth and green, go for it. Whatever it is, you're both fulfilling the mitzvah. But we have the obligation also to be involved with that, to come up with the design, to do something, that it's going to be meaningful to me. And this is something that, if you take it to the two extremes, that's what we see today. In Reform Judaism and left of it and renewal and all that kind of stuff, halacha is sometimes secondary. And it's all about the expression. It's all about the experience. And the experience and the expression is more important than the halacha itself. And the other extreme is what happens in the Haredi world. Even things that are not halachic at all. You got to do it this way. No, that's the way we do things. And if you, God forbid, you want to wear a blue shirt on Shabbat, it's going to be like a disaster. Is this halacha? No. If you want to have like a different color of a tichl, whatever, that's going to be a disaster. So these are the two extremes. And I think that what the Torah is trying to teach us, you need to combine the two. You need to have the two. This is how you create healthy religious life. Happy and relevant and meaningful religious experience. You need to have both. Yes.
It's funny. And so the first time I went to Israel, it happened to be Shabbat. And so everybody went to my whole group. We all went to the Kosel. It's exactly the Eva. And I happened to be sitting right close to the Chayza. And you could hear all these different voices and all these different nuskahot all together. And it was just so beautiful. You don't have to all do that. We just happen to be.
I think that we're going so crazy with the stuff, and we let all that stuff sometimes take over our sight of what is important and what is not important. Somebody came to me a couple of weeks ago, young couple from our YP, from our young professional, whatever. And they said to me, listen, I married a Persian girl. You live in LA, it's going to happen. Oh, I said, one of the young couples came to me and they said, the guy came to me and said, listen, I married a Persian girl. And he is not Persian, he is Ashkenazi. Yeah, mixed marriage. And he said, we're going to her parents for the Seder. And he said, like, these are extremely traditional Persians. If I'm not going to eat her rice, my mother-in-law, there's no, I can't, she's going to be offended. I said, listen, I'm not the rabbi. I'm not paskin on that. I'm not, when a psak, you go to Rabbi Top. I'm not paskin. I want to ask you a question though. As a friend, I want you to think about the fact that we're talking about, yes, it's a very important custom. Not eating kitniot for Ashkenazim, it's a very important custom, and it's a custom that has been there for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. This is not something that you can take lightly. But it's a custom. It's a custom because it is kosher. Rice is absolutely kosher. Well, rice is its own category. Forget about kitniot. But whatever. It's kosher because Sephardim eat that. So you can't say it's not kosher. And I want you to take that in consideration and put it on one side of the scale. The other side of the scale is Shlom Bayit, is your relationship with your mother-in-law, God willing, to 120. That's a long time. And you tell me, after Pesach, I don't want to know how you handle those. And I think that unfortunately, many of our people, especially in the Orthodox world, are not even bothering with those questions. Meaning, I can't do that. I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to eat that, and whatever. And then it's like, what is the big picture? What is the big picture? Somebody, my rabbi, told me that the older guy is around 90 in New York. Said to me, like, I went to daven mincha this week, and there was like this young guy running so fast, he almost knocked me over. I'm an elderly guy. It's like, and of course, this kid turned immediately and said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was in a hurry to mincha, not to be late for mincha. And he says, like, I get it. It's important to get to shul on time to daven mincha. But if you're running, and because of that, you lose sight and you're almost knocked down, the 90-year-old person, then something is wrong because you're not even paying attention to that stuff. So davening mincha, yes, it's important. But what does it make me in the process? There's something that I'm not saying, but we sometimes don't even think about it. We gotta think about that. We need to be aware of it. I'm gonna give one last example. I had about 8 calls in the last 2-3 weeks from families in the shul, young families, families with young kids. What can we do? The Seder starts so late. Our kids are, and I said, listen, I'm not giving you a psak. I'm really not giving you a psak. If you want the official answer from the shul, it's in the calendar. It says 8:06, the earliest time to start the Seder, period. There's nothing I can do about that. But if you take the whole thing that's called Leila Seder, the Seder night, and you break it down to components and you start to understand what's going on over there. So first of all, what is the nucleus? What is the purpose we do the whole thing? Is Vigata Levincha, is to educate and tell the story to our children. If my kids are already like too tired, they're not really there, then what's the purpose of doing that? So that's one element. That's one element. Now, yes, there are halachic issues. You can't say Kiddush too early. You can't eat the matzah too early. You can't eat the maror too early. You can't say Hallel too early. These are halachic issues. Got it. What about the rest? How much time do we, I'm not going to say the word waste, but spend on the other things, on the songs, on Divrei Torah, on the Magid discussion, whatever, all that stuff. In my house, there's a lot of games and a lot of, they put on a show and whatever, all that kind of stuff. And people have the traditions with the onions and whatever, and all that kind of stuff. And and the karpas and breaking the matzah, whatever, all those other elements. I want to be very clear. I'm not telling anyone that they can do that. If you want a practical psak, you need to go to Rabbi Top, not me. But what if we change the order? I know it's called the Seder, it's the order. But what if you change, especially on the second day, you change the order a little bit? And what you have to do from halachic perspective, you have to do after 8:06, you do after 8:06. But everything else, the songs, the discussion, the play, the kids' projects, whatever, even like part of the meal, you do that earlier. And by doing so, allowing the kids to actually participate in the Seder. And then by 9:30, you're done. You don't have to drag it until midnight. I'm just throwing an idea. Are we telling people that they can do that? Absolutely not. It's not the tradition. But that's exactly what the Shema is and the mitzvah of tzitzit telling us. You got to make it relevant. The reality is that the kids are out. Little kids, 8:30, 9 o'clock to start, they're too tired. They're not receptive. They're not getting anything. They're falling asleep on the couch. What's the purpose? We're doing it. We're doing it to get them involved. We want them to know the story. So there's always a solution. That's what my Rabbi Riskin always told me. There's always a solution. You got to think out of the box. You got to be creative. You need to have courage. So we're not, we have a problem with that. We're not, this is we do things, and that's the way we do that, and that's it. That's not the self-expression. I get it. When you're an empty nester or you have teenagers even, it's not a big deal. It's fine. But when you have little kids, you need to have a different tune. You need to do things perhaps in a different way. And by the way, I'm going to put another layer on that. If we don't teach the people and we don't show them the different options, then do you know what they do? They do what they know. They go by the order, and they're going to do things halachically wrong. They're going to say the Kiddush in the wrong time. Because Kiddush at the very beginning. Because they say, listen, my kids are not going to last. So I'm going to start it at 6 o'clock. I don't care. It's the self-expression. But for that, you need to know what's the core and what is the minhag and what is the stuff around that. That's the story of redemption. That's the story of the Arishonim and the Acharonim. It's the old generations and the latter generation. And we have to move between this idea back and forth of the two elements of Yetziat Mitzrayim, but it's also the love, the faith. This is personal. This is how I'm going to implement my love, my faith. Yes, I'm going to do it within the halachic boundaries. But what flavor? It's mine. It's mine. And who is the Rasha here? Who is the son, the wicked son? Why is he wicked? His question is good. You took yourself out of the collective. That is the problem. If we're not going to allow diversity, people are going to find themselves outside of the boundaries. They're going to find themselves outside the collective. That's the wicked son. And that's exactly what we need to prevent. We need to make sure that no one is going to be out of the collective. And for that, you need to expand the spectrum, and you need to show people there's room for everybody. There's room for everybody. And not only that, that's the message of Pesach. How do we start? Kol bichfin. We invite everybody. There's room for everybody. Everybody has a different flavor of their brisket. So what? We're still brothers. We still have the same narrative. We still have the same exodus. That is the challenge. This is what mitzvah tzitzit. This is the Pesach. Wow, it's like even got like to talk about Pesach. That was not even part of the plan. It was not even part of the plan. But this is the challenge, and this is, I think, the challenge for Judaism today. But that's, that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do. And you can't get, only in the past. You saved us from the house of Egypt and all that kind of stuff, blah, 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 blah. Look where this is. It's taking us to what? For this, the beloved ones praised and exalted God. The cherished ones sang psalms, songs, and praises, blessings, and thanksgiving to the King. That's what we need to do as well. We were not in Egypt, I get it. So we're trying to relive the experience in the Seder night. We in the blessing of redemption, we say twice a day, in the morning, in the evening, we say the blessing of redemption, different text, but whatever, the same theme of redemption. Because what? It's not only the national, it's also the personal redemption. It's this movement back and forth all the time. It's the national and the private. It's the private redemption as well that I want to express in my Judaism. In my religious life, I need to take my personal experience and make it relevant. When I'm davening, I have certain things in my head because of my situation, my family, whatever, the things that are on my mind. It's different than what Nikki has. But you know what? We're saying the same words. We're together in the same room. It really doesn't matter what's going on in my head. But if I'm not going to think about it, and I'm going to be told this is exactly the way we do things, and that's what you're supposed to be thinking, and all that kind of stuff, that there's nothing personal about that. And this is why so many of our young people say, you know what, that's not relevant to me. And they're out. They're out. They're out of the collective. Because we're not embracing. We say, that's what you need to tell them. Listen, guy, whatever you want, it's like, as long as you're part of that collective, you're part of the family, okay. Every family has somebody who is a little bit extreme. So what? Instead of making them feel as an outsider, let's try the opposite. Let's expand. Yeah, my custom is not to eat rice. But you know what? Maybe it's more important to have a good relationship with my mother-in-law. It's kosher. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? Do you think that God is going to strike me down? My personal feeling, God would say, you did the right choice. This is my personal feeling. You don't have to follow that. Other people are going to follow a different way. That's fine. But think about it. People use their head. Don't go like this. You got to think. And of course, like, the flip side to, Reform Judaism, I say, hey, there is a spectrum. Don't ignore it. We have to agree on something. Yes, you can have your own flavor of it, but you know what? You gotta agree on the basics. I don't want to open it to other topics, but this is where we stand with part of the problem that we have. For example, in Israel, has been going on for the last 25 years or so. Big debate about the definition of who's Jewish. Why this is exploded all of a sudden? Because Reformed Judaism decided to move away from the traditional definition and decided to accept paternal descendants. Okay, now this is fundamental. Okay, we have different flavors. We do things in a different way. I get it. But this is really to the core who is Jewish, who is not Jewish. In other words, according to my definition, a person is not Jewish. According to your definition, he's Jewish. That means we don't speak the same language anymore. It's not about spectrum. It's two different languages now. That's a problem. And that's exactly what we need to avoid at all costs. We have to avoid at all costs. Everybody needs to come to some sort of a compromise. Everybody needs to be more flexible so we can have enough common ground that we can work with. Unfortunately, that common ground is getting smaller and smaller and smaller every day because of extremes on both sides.
That's the beauty and brilliance of Judaism. It's thinking everything that you've said, the flexibility.
Unfortunately, people don't practice flexibility anymore. That's my problem. Everything becomes so rigid and so, oh, this is the halacha. I said, seriously, this is the halacha? Let's break it down. Let's see. 300 years, that's a custom that nobody even heard of. It's like everything today is halacha. No, it's not. No, it's not. So,
But who's to say? So there's no one chief rabbi to say, no, this is the way it.
correct, but we don't need one. You don't need one. Look at the books. You can go and you can actually, if you actually do your research, you actually see when certain things actually were born.
Always different, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't think, oh, Mashiach is gonna come along on the answer. The Shvatim, they were actually lived separated for a long time. So they were like, this has always been.
And this is fine. It's fine. But we need to make sure that we always have enough common ground, that the spectrum is wide enough to include everybody. And unfortunately, we're going through a process in which we're going like that. I'm very, very, and I think that and when you go more and more this way instead of this way, more and more people are going to find themselves outside. Hence, the biggest denomination, I called it the biggest denomination, or the only one that is like, the growing in America is the unaffiliated.
Is the what?
Unaffiliated.
Yeah.
Reform is shrinking, conservative is dead, Orthodox is growing, but not as fast as unaffiliated.
Mean nothing.
Not interested.
Political ideology is taking the place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a terrible thing. Terrible thing. By the way, we've been in that. We've been there before. We've been there before. Okay? First Christians were good Jews. And instead of working with them, making sure that they stay within Judaism, we lost that opportunity. I don't want that to happen again. Correct.
Experience, I also have the mixed marriage. My husband's Ashkenazi, but not Hasidic. And it's like to a degree, I'm like on a personal level, it's psychological. This gentleman who called you up, it's psychological.
Correct.
I think more than anything else, more than anything sport breaking along. I think it's just psychological, it's so ingrained on you. And with me personally, I have to tell you, if I hadn't had a cousin who did it 2 years before, I don't know, I had friends that didn't accept it. She would make, the brush her husband, and she would never touch it. And it just, to me, I think it's just a psychological.
It's fine. You want to be machmir on yourself, that's fine. What's the
Yeah.
price for that every time? That's what you need to ask yourself. I'm totally okay with people that want to take more stringencies upon themselves. If it makes you happy, go for it. I don't care. Some people do also Ironman. It looks painful to me as well.
They do what?
they go on Iron Man, like, races, like, it's, or people expect, like, do whatever you want, drink green shakes. I don't really care. If it makes you happy, that's fine. The question is, what is the, like, and at what expense? Does it have a price on your relationship? Does it have a price with your friends, with your spouse, with your kids, whatever? I hear horror stories of kids that come back from yeshiva and they don't want to eat in their parents' homes because it's not up to their standards. All sorts of like horror stories. It's like, are you kidding me?
I have a cousin who didn't come back. His father asked to come back when his mom passed away. Please, I need you home. I need you to help me. And he asked his Rosh Hashanah said, at the end of time. When did your Rosh Hashanah become your father?
Correct. So there's all sorts of like horror stories that we lose sight of what is really important. Since when that type of observance of customs, by the way, or whatever, listening to your Rosh Yeshiva and that kind of, is more important than Kibud Avaim? Like, since when? This is like complete distortion of the Torah. It drives me crazy. It's like, what happened in the holidays in Uman? Like the crazy chassid. There was a war in the Ukraine. A war. Bombs are flying there. And they have to go to daven Rosh Hashanah over there. Excuse me?
And they sit down for people in.
Correct. And by the way, during COVID, they went there during COVID as well. You know how many people? It's like, since when? This is not halacha. You fulfill your mitzvah in davening in your local shul. Nobody said you need to take a plane to Russia. Sorry, Ukraine, to fulfill that. I don't get it. And this becomes like the most important thing. Well, it's like, are we out of our minds? You want to do it? That's good. That's fine. What's the price? Oh, bombs, war, sure. Since when are you allowed to put your life at risk for that? Okay, COVID. Oh, I don't care about that. Since when are you allowed? Like, the parameter, everything is like upside down. By the way, the price that those families put, like, they leave their wife and their kids at home to celebrate the Chagim on themselves. It's like, what is the price of, like, of your relationship with your? They don't even think about that. It's really, it's mind-boggling. It's like all that stuff. I have a friend that's called it, we call it Taliban religion. It is.
There's similarities there.
And it starts from that. The nucleus comes from here. It comes from here because you lose the self. Once you say, okay, that's not important. What's important is only what the rabbi said. What's important is, like, no. I have a friend. I spoke with one of my classes, like, previously. And with that, we're going to finish. When I give one of the series, I don't remember. I have a friend in Israel who always said that the rabbi need to have, and actually every person needs to have 3 ears. 3 ears, not 2, 3. One, you have to listen to what we call Dvar Hashem, the word of God. What God wants from me, fine. Number 2, my own inner voice. And number 3 is my community or whatever, society. And you need to create some sort of a mix between the 3. And if you ignore one of them, you're in trouble. So you need to have 3 ears. 3 ears for that. Okay. I wish everybody a Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Obviously, next week we're not going to meet. We're going to take a break. The Chag is Shabbat and Rishon and Sunday. So Tuesday, we'll be fine. Okay, so 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, and Miri's job is to remind me that we're going to start with the Amidah, weekday Amidah. Finally, we're there. Chag Sameach. Enjoy the Chag.
Yeah.